Hey, somebody's got to put on their helmet. You have? Excellent. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. You are listening to The Professional Noticer. Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Andrews. Hey, thank you for making me part of your week. My purpose here today with every show we do is to play the part of a best friend or a coach. I want to help you live the life of your wildest dreams by giving you access to the greatest mentors the world has to offer today. This week, the Professional Noticer is sponsored by Books for Veterans. The Veterans Administration in Washington, D.C. has asked for 10,000 Andy Andrews books. I'm personally donating as many as I can, but to reach 10,000, I need your help. What we're able to do to make that easier for you is for every $10 donation you make, a hardback book will be sent to the Veterans Administration for veterans, their families, and for employees of the VA. That $10 will cover the cost of shipping a hardback book, the shipping and the handling. So whether you can make this a personal gift or a corporate donation, just go to andyandrews.com/veterans. This can be added to a website purchase or done as an individual entry. And thanks very much for your support. They say thanks too. Hey, today on the Professional Noticer, now I'm gonna tell you, if you are the leader of anything, if you're kind of a type A person, if you're in charge of anything, don't turn away from this podcast. All right? I'm just telling you, because there's going to be meat here that you're going to want to hear. Now, I told somebody recently, I said, on the Professional Noticer, because somebody had called me or they emailed me and said, hey, on this guest, you don't need to do so-and-so and so-and-so. And I said, hey, hang on just a second. All the guests on the Professional Noticer are asked to be here. Nobody calls us up and says, hey, can I be on your podcast? We ask. Nobody's paid. And so we want to get a bunch of different kinds of opinions, opportunities to listen. We consider the Professional Noticer like a good buffet. All right. So if you go into a buffet and you get the trout almondine and then you get the salad and you see there's beets, you don't go, beets? I'm leaving, and just leave the buffet. No, you just skip the beets and go to the banana pudding. Okay? So there's always beets in almost everything that we do in life. And so many people miss out on the best parts because they just can't ignore the beets. So today, we have a very unusual guest. He is a longtime friend of mine, an incredibly successful pastor of a huge church in Nashville, Tennessee. And that's kind of all I'm going to tell you right now. He is retired from pastoring, but he's still coaching and mentoring and working with organizations. And he has written a book that blew me away because nobody writes a book like this, especially not a pastor. Please welcome Maury Davis.
Hello, Andy. How are you doing, sir?
Good, buddy. How are you?
I am great. It's good to be with you.
You too, man. I mean, the first time we ever met, I think it was in J. Alexander's in Nashville.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, and having conversation, and then we got to kind of be buddies, and we would text and email every now and then. I'd send you a book, you'd send me a book.
Mm-hmm. And you came and spoke at my church.
I did.
And they love you.
Do you know the time that, and I also came to your church on, I think it was Veterans Day or Memorial Day.
Memorial Day.
Yeah, and Mike Huckabee was speaking, and the boys were, Polly and the boys were with me, and the boys were very little. And when we went back to meet Huckabee before the thing started, right? He's in the green room, but out in the hallway were these guys that were dressed up in the uniforms of every war that America's been in, from the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, all the way up to World War II, to the Gulf War, and every single one of them. And so, I take the boys in. This is Governor Mike Huckabee, and they're saying, and we get out, and I said, "What did you think about meeting the governor?" I said, "Did you see those guns?" It's like they didn't care about Mike at all, just the gun. But you did an amazing thing there at Cornerstone.
Well, God blessed us. My wife and I went there in 1991, and I stayed until 2018. And God allowed us to take a little church on a gravel parking lot and build, I think, about $53 million worth of buildings, a congregation of about 4,000. We have 8 churches that we started out of Cornerstone. Their current attendance on Sunday, I think, is about 28,000 on Sunday morning amongst them. We did a lot of missions work in Kenya, built 2,000 tabernacles, the metal tabernacle buildings for pastors they said, this is my church, and it'd be a tree out on the Masai Mara. So it was a work of love. We love the city of Nashville, love the people of Nashville. And when you do what you love, you can keep doing it a long time.
And you were well known, because people, you are well known. And people would come to that church because of the things that you did. I remember you had a rodeo.
Yes, sir.
Inside. And the day we were there with that Veterans or Memorial Day thing, it wasn't just the guys with the guns. At one point, SEALs fast roped out of the ceilings.
Yes, sir. We honored, that was a day that we honored people that have given their lives or are giving their lives for our country. And so many people say, well, that doesn't have anything to do with church. Well, the Bible says, give honor to whom honor is due. And the reason we have the freedom in America to voice difference of opinions, preach the gospel without government persecution is because the military keeps the people that don't want us to preach in other countries. And so our freedom to preach the gospel is definitely protected by our Constitution, our government, and our military personnel.
Well, now, what protects you from the women's organizations when you decide to have a rodeo in your sanctuary?
Well, PETA is a challenging organization. They cram the computers, they do everything. But, the bulls are only ridden for 8 seconds a month.
So but y'all turned the floor of it into a dirt?
Yeah, we had to take the chairs up, and then we had to have bulldozers bring in dirt and build a rodeo arena that would hold those bulls so they couldn't get out in the audience. And we do 4 invite events a year, and they're intended to get unchurched people, or people say, I'm never going to church, or I've never been to church, I'm never going back to church, to say, well, I'm going to go to that. And they come in the church, and they say, well, this was okay. I went to church, and it was okay. And, we had 17,000 visitors for that event. And that's 17,000 people that we're going to follow up with. And obviously, we preached the gospel, about a 9 to 10 minute preaching message in the middle of the rodeo. That year, I preached the sermon, No More Bull, and which it just kind of fit the theme of what was going on. And so we do have people make commitments to Christ in those events, but the follow-up is where the true harvest comes from. And most churches specialize on the event, and they don't spend as much time on the follow-up. And there's no reason to do an event if you're not going to do the harvest. That's like planting the field and just watching it go to pot because nobody harvested it.
Yeah.
And so those were a lot of fun. We do the largest indoor fireworks show in the southeastern part of the United States as our 4th of July event. So each 4th of July, we have some special event. You happen to be there around for a rodeo.
Yeah. So you retired in 2018.
October of 2018, I said my goodbyes.
And before you retired, now here's where I want to segue into something. I don't mean to make this uncomfortable for you because you brought it up. Okay, you're the one who did it. And I got to say, when I read this book, this is Hindsight, 2020 by Maury Davis, 10 Mistakes That Offer Clarity and Vision. And when I read this book, I thought, Maury is nuts. I mean, I couldn't quit reading it. I mean, I could not put it down. And I don't say that about many books. But, and let me just say this right here. If you're a CEO, if you're a leader of anything, if you're a dad, if you're kind of that outgoing type A type thing, if you're leading a group, you have to get this book. I mean, put down what you're reading now and read this book. Now, Maury, at some point, you guys had been building,
Mm-hmm.
and then you plateaued.
Yes, sir. I went to Cornerstone Church in 1991, February of 91, and in 2010, we were at 4,000 people. And I brought in a company to do an evaluation of our church. We were looking at building some buildings. And they said, let's do an assessment of where you are. And the report that came back was challenging to me emotionally. We had never had a year in 20 years of non-growth. And it's the measurables, the giving, the attendance, missions giving, number of people that made commitments to Christ, number of people being baptized, all of the measurables that man can measure said success. And they said, your church is 7 years older today than it was 5 years ago. Well, I know what that means. It means your church is aging, and our children's ministry building did not support the sanctuary that we built. So the peripheral ministries that are really the foundation of a growing church, children, youth, education, discipleship, community, we built this giant sanctuary and didn't build the other stuff. So they said, your church will begin to go down. Well, that rocked my world because I'd never dealt with that. And so for the next 7 years or so, we built the buildings that they said we needed to build, added to this structure, built the largest indoor playground for children in Nashville, Tennessee, that if you Google things to do for free for kids in Nashville, it's one of the top 3 to 5 things that comes up on Google. We'll have 250 families a week come by and just let their kids play on this playground. And it just created traffic. But it also created a different way that we build churches, which is through community, not through the sanctuary service.
Right.
So I went through that, and so I realized that I needed a younger person to do that. So I began to transition the church to my son, and we brought in Dr. Sam Chan, who did a profile and worked with the board of directors, and I had to step back a little bit so it wasn't nepotism, and to go through that process, and so the emotional ride of why did this happen began the first year we were down in attendance. And what happens, the older you are, the more risk averse you are because you don't have time to recover. And so you, instead of operating from a visionary position, you operate from a knee-jerk position, and you become anxious.
Right.
And anxiety communicated to the people that are following you does not produce a healthy culture. And so they begin to have a lot of staff turnover. And so things that were going not so good are now going from bad to worse. And it took us about 5 or 6 years before I kind of came to this place that I began to do.
I mean, you had retired when you kind of figured there's another reason we've plateaued too.
Yes, and it was me. Everything rises and falls on leadership, as our friend John Maxwell says.
Right.
And I was going through Dream Releaser Coaching. It's a program, and I was doing the internal work to discover what my personal mission, vision, purpose statement should be. And as I was doing the exercises, and I was having to get honest about the markers in my life, things that had made Maury Davis, our life experience, our family, education, all those things. I was reading the scripture where Paul said, those things I want to do, I don't do. Those things I don't want to do, I do. There's something going on within me. And it caught my breath. it literally stopped me, and I thought, I've never seen a leader get transparent. And I began to study transparent introspection from a leadership position. What happens when leaders allow people to know we have feet of clay. We know this treasure is in an earthen vessel. And so I sat down one day, and this was in 2015, about 3 years before I left. And I began to write down things that I look back in hindsight that I got wrong. And I made a list of far more than 10. But I thought, what were the 10 most damaging things Maury Davis got wrong that created a plateau, a decline, may have limited the growth during the 20 years of growth? What could have been, which is a hard thought to think.
It's a hard thought to go with.
But a leader that doesn't face the hard thoughts is not going to lead very far. You have to have the hard conversations, and you need to have them with yourself, not just with your staff.
Well, this, I made sure that several of my pastor friends got this, and I said, I'm telling you, this is going to be shocking to you. Not shocking in that you're shocked somebody would behave this way, because we've all seen behavior like this, especially in leadership. We've all seen behaviors like this. But this is going to shock you that a pastor said, yeah, I did it, and it damaged what I was doing, and here's what to do to avoid it. And I got to say, as far as readability goes, this book is right up there with bull riding and NASCAR, because I could not put it down, because I knew I'd turn the page, here's another wreck. And I knew you one way, Maury. Mm-hmm. And so to read a book where you are so transparent, and let me tell you this, not only transparent in this book and is saying what he did wrong and telling the stories about the way he dealt with people, he then allowed 10 people at the end of these 10 mistakes, he allowed these people to write a part of the book about what was happening. And then they get together at the end of the chapter and talk about what they learned from it and what Maury's learned. Now, I don't want to embarrass you or anything, but I've just got to read from a couple of chapters.
Okay.
If that's okay. Now, man, I am sweating just about to read this. But the chapter 3 is, the mistake was, I was insensitive to people's feelings. And there's a quote that says, it takes something more than intelligence to act intelligently. And so here's how the chapter starts. When something around the house breaks, I fix it. But people aren't appliances. Everything is created to accomplish something. Unfortunately, I'm afraid that's how I saw people who reported to me. They were tools to achieve the purposes God had put on my heart. It wasn't just that I assigned them lanes to run in, I put them into pigeonholes and insisted they stay there. This is a painful chapter in this book for me to write, and I would imagine for you to read. I trained people to stop thinking. Though I was committed to excellence, I trained my team to believe they were incapable of excellence without me hovering over them and telling them how to do everything. And then then you go on to talk about Mark, your music guy at the time, and it says, I remember walking by his office one day and noticing he was sitting there. I stopped at his door and asked, what are you doing? He said, just thinking. My blood boiled. I snarled. I don't pay you to think. I pay you to work. Now, I got to stop there and just tell you, if you want to read Most biographies, most memoirs that I read, there is a part in these books you just can't help but try to make yourself look a little better than you are. But Maury wrote this book, and he didn't say, I said to him, because people, when they're relating an instance that happened, and you say, hey, you really got all over them. Well, no, I just told them that, well, no, that isn't the tone of voice I heard. Well, when Maury is telling the story, he says, my blood boiled, I snarled. This is authentic stuff. So he said, I don't pay you to think, I pay you to work. It was a really dumb thing to say, but it's even worse that I believed it. People who micromanage have now, right, this is written years later by the man who who he has become, and he's looking back. People who micromanage have two related devastating effects. They communicate to people that they're incompetent, and they create an environment of fear so people always wait on them, the leader, to make every decision. They haven't felt valued or free to speak up, so they wither away in a drought of affirmation. After the way I treated him, I'm afraid Mark drew the only logical conclusion. It wasn't safe to be around me. He withdrew and took fewer risks so he could avoid public humiliation. His creativity wilted, and he was afraid to even give input because he didn't want to be blasted again. He noticed the songs I liked, and he used them more often than he would have if he'd felt free to pick from a wider range. I'm pretty sure his primary goal was getting through each day without getting in trouble with me. Instead of being a difference maker, he became a defensive player. Mark was with us for more than 6 years, but I never gave him room to use his remarkable talents. And then Mark gets to write a piece. Buddy, I'm still. I mean, it's been several months since I first read this book, and there is a study guide to this book. But I got to say, I mean, I grew up with pastors. I work with CEOs. I see behind the scene forgiveness and apologies and all, but I don't see anybody standing up and saying, this is the mess I made.
Mm-hmm. You know, first of all, it's hard.
I would imagine.
You have to come to a place of emotional health you've never had to be honest about the brokenness that you've hidden. Most people never come to that place in life. And so before I wrote the book, I called every employee that had ever worked for me and invited them to a round table, free of charge, at my church. And I taught all this stuff. And I apologized to them publicly. Here's what I did. Here's what I did to you. And I actually told Mark Lunsford's story sitting in that room. People are weeping. I'm weeping. And it was a time of at least healing for many. Certainly relational healing for all of us. But it was healing to them that I was saying, I see it now. I'm sorry. I can't fix it, but I'm sorry. Mark Lunsford was a genius that sat in my church, and because of my flaw, my micromanagement and my not recognizing other people's giftings, I squashed him, I quenched him, I hurt him. He went to another church with another leader and took a little church of 100 to 8,000 as the executive pastor, using all of his giftings and all of his systems. That's sitting there with that legal pad thinking, I'm just thinking. That's gold. What I didn't realize, I was looking at gold and not seeing it except as a lump of dirt. And so because of the way that my formation, doers get promoted. People that are inactive get penalized. I didn't realize at that point, and I know this sounds really naive, and I know people are looking saying, how could you think like that? The answer is it's a unique gift. However, more leaders have it than want to admit it.
Yeah, I
more leaders have it than want to admit it. That's why all the cultures aren't healthy in all the businesses and churches. What I didn't realize is that somebody thinking, and I'm not talking about sleeping, daydream, I'm talking about thinking, is incredible value. All of my pastors that I do consulting with and coaching, I ask them to put at least 2 one-hour segments in every week with nothing but a legal pad, a pencil or a pen, no technology, think time. I've come to value think time as much as prayer time, as much as study time, as much as sermon preparation time. People that are going to take their lives to the next level and lead people at the next level and become a different level person have got to have think time in their life. And so what I did not value and I mocked, made fun of, didn't understand, today is now a pillar of what I believe every life needs every week.
Wow. All right. Well, I'm going to hit you again here.
I'm sure glad you're my friend.
Yeah. Okay, so I thought this chapter especially good. This chapter spoke to me. I know it will speak to a lot of people. And the mistake was I confused authentic with unfiltered. So here's what Maury says. I convinced myself that saying outlandish things made me authentic, which, as we all know, is highly prized in our culture. All kinds of research says that people want their leaders to be real, to be genuine, to be authentic. That's what I was going for. I made a habit of being sarcastic and using humor to get a lot of laughs, but I offended a significant number of people Jesus loves. I was unfiltered, not authentic. And then he goes on to say, Terry Exley was a member of our board who then joined our pastoral staff. On a Monday morning, after I'd said something in the service the night before, I walked in while he was talking to Pastor Sandy. They were reviewing the list of unfiltered comments in just that one sermon. When he saw me, he asked, "Do you ever feel bad about anything you say?" Instantly, I remarked, "Yes, but I get over it." I walked on by, but I was still within earshot when I heard him say, "But other people don't." All right, so here is, this is under the heading Turning Point. When our church's growth slowed to a halt in 2012, I had to face the fact that my communication was at least one of the limiting factors. I contacted Sam Chan to ask for his input. In our conversations, I realized the culture had shifted, but I hadn't shifted with it. I had some honest talks with people I trust and love. A common theme in their feedback was that my humor was no longer a draw. In fact, it had become a barrier to growth. More than a few of them told stories of inviting people to church. Their friends had been turned off by my attempts to be funny. People who were already comfortable with my humor stayed, but few new people came. Those who had been with us for years enjoyed my unfiltered manner, but God had called us to reach far beyond our walls. And I realized you don't make fun of people you love. And if I was making fun of people who are different from me, or foreigners, or people from different parts of our country, it was a neon flashing sign that I didn't love them. I didn't have just a mouth problem. I had a heart problem. No matter how much joy I got out of turning a witty phrase and making people laugh, love is far more important. I was treating our people like family. That doesn't sound like a bad idea, but here's what happened. It's perfectly fine for me to walk through my house wearing just my boxers if it's only my wife and me there. But if we invite guests, it's a good idea for me to put pants on. It was time for me to put my verbal pants on. To be honest, it was a hard transition for me. Whew. I mean, that is just as straight to your own gut. Being honest with yourself as I have ever seen, buddy.
Yeah, the revelation, the difference in authentic communication and unfiltered communication, authentic is predictable. Unfiltered is unpredictable. So if our goal is to get people to bring people, they need to be comfortable that what you're going to say is predictable, because the people they're bringing may or may not have the same belief system, humor, political stance. And so we live in such a fragmented society, no longer a melting pot where you're an American with no hyphen to a diverse society. That culture has shifted, and that is the truth. And, whether it's male, female, black, white, Democrat, Republican, Blue Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, LGBT. I mean, America has shifted radically. And part of that shift is the willingness of people to allow themselves to be easily offended. You talked about the beats at the beginning of this podcast. And, I've always said horses have enough sense to eat the hay and leave the sticks. They don't quit eating because there's sticks in the hay bale. And but people today don't. If they find a stick, I'm not eating there anymore. There's a beet on the bar, I'm not going to there. And so is it worth putting the beet there knowing you're not going to feed the people? They're not coming. And so the understanding of people's tenderness of human emotions today, which are more exposed or more talked about than they were in our generation. Our parents didn't talk about problems. They just plowed through. That's not what's happening today. And because people are talking about their problems, they talk about what they like, what they don't like, that hurt, that didn't hurt, he hurt me. They don't just sit silently. They're going to tell somebody that preacher said this and hurt me. So now they're not coming back, and the people they're talking to are not coming back. And so when you realize that the very goal of your whole life is being affected by the way you communicate, which is a product of the way you think.
Right.
It's hurtful that you're hurting what your cause is, the kingdom of God and people. It's challenging because changing the way you think is a heavy lift. And it took me about 2 or 3 years I had to go back to school and go through some courses and do some really inner work where there are exercises. I'm having to write feelings down. And in other words, the shadow motives are what you've got to get to. And I shared with you that
explain that.
It's a little bit in the book. In my early life, I really messed up. And you know the whole story, Andy. It was horrible what I did, and I ended up in prison. And so when I got out of prison, became a janitor at a church, I was climbing the ladder to get back to a place of what I believed was respect. And so as I was going through the process of writing this book and the exercise that led to even understanding why to write the book, I discovered that I had the shadow motive in my life of proving every day I was bigger than my shame and my guilt. 8 out of the 10 of these things that are in that book came from that motive. I'm going to prove I'm bigger than shame. I'm not going to fail. Church's not going to fail. There's no opportunity for failure. You can't make mistakes. We're going to have a perfected look. We're going to look good. We're going to sound good. In other words, I wasn't just achieving a vision. I was proving I was bigger than my shame and guilt. So anytime you're proving something, you're in a headspace where you may run over people or use people or hurt people. When you're pursuing something, you bring people with you and you lift other people up. Most type A people are provers, not pursuers. And it takes a different level of thinking for them to get there. And helping people become pursuers of something. It's like the difference in a dream and a scheme. You know, a scheme only benefits me. A dream benefits us.
Wow.
And so, I've always been a dreamer. And I've been very careful to make sure that what I'm doing lifts other people. in my dreaming. But in my leading, I was a prover, not a pursuer. And so because of that, you have cognitive dissonance going on. On one side, you're operating in a noble way. And the other side, you're operating in a selfish way. And so it produces a tremendous amount of inner conflict that is maybe subconscious. That's why I call it shadow motive. It's a motive that you don't know is there. It's in the shadows. But it really is the driving force of what you're doing. And so part of the reason writing the book and the workbook was so people that say, I want to get my life better. I want to do better. I want to live better. I want to lead better. I just want to be healthier mentally and emotionally. They can go through that process of not looking at my, stuff. I mean, I put mine out there not for people to throw rocks at me, although you can if you want to, if you got one, and you won't be the first person, but for people to say, hey, if he can get honest, and you don't have to write a book. But I didn't need to write a book. I needed to get honest with me. I wrote the book for other people. But I needed to identify these things to fix Maury Davis.
The book is Hindsight 2020. 10 mistakes that offer clarity and vision. It also has a study guide that you can get with it. And I've got to say, you need to get it, okay? I mean, that's as personal an endorsement as I can make.
Can we give it away for free?
Sure.
If they will text text Maury, M-A-U-R-Y, to 33777, they can get the book. I think it's $6.99, which covers shipping, handling, and the people in the warehouse. Now they're going to upsell them to the workbook. The study guide's going to cost more. And then the master classes, once you get there, they'll send you an email back and you can pick what you want. But they can get that book for under $7 if they text Maury to 33777.
Okay. Wow. There's your deal right there. And we'll have that, we'll put that on the show notes too.
Yes, sir.
And so thank you so much for being with us.
It's good to be with you. I sure appreciate all you do, sir.
Well, I have appreciated you for a long time, and that appreciation is increasing.
Thank you, sir.
I'm Andy Andrews, the professional noticer, harnessing common sense and wisdom to plow through challenges all the way to an answer for you. And I think that'll do it for this week. Get us out of here, Matthew. So, ladies and gentlemen, and to the boys and girls who aspire to become ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of another episode of The Professional Noticer. In a world where common sense has become a superpower, I'm harnessing the tiny bit of mental energy I have for you, seeking wisdom, making observations, and endeavoring to answer tough questions in a way that will empower your family and your business. I'm Andy Andrews. Until next week, goodbye. This episode of The Professional Noticer was produced by Matt Limpert. The Noticer theme performed by Sugarcane Jane. Boxing gloves provided for the cast and crew by Twinkle and Smoke of Beverly Hills. Additional financial consideration provided by songsinmymemory.com. Friend, would you like to send your brain signals instead of the other way around? Do you sometimes wish upon a star? Wish that you could think about something other than what's on your mind at the moment? Have we got a deal for you? For a monthly subscription price of $8.99, songsinmymemory.com will send you 3 times a lady. We'll send you 3 voicemails every day designed to remove your current thoughts and replace them with an earworm of music. These voicemails will take less than 1 is the loneliest number that you'll ever hear. Less than 1 minute to read, so it won't take too much time. In a bottle, the first thing that I'd like to do won't take too much time. Songsinmymemory.com works to create Feelings, nothing more than feelings. Feelings in your brain as late as tomorrow or as early as yesterday. All my troubles seem so far away as early as yesterday. So subscribe now, songsinmymemory.com. It's a website you'll want to
Tell by the way I use my walk, I'm a woman's man. No time to talk.
a website you'll want to tell your friends about.